welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book The Scribe Coimbra, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Old man Coimbra, the clerk, stood in line at the lottery office like so many others, waiting to buy his ticket. On the surface, it might seem sad to see an old man chasing luck, but if you think about it, there's something cheerful in that act. The fact that he still believes, even when everything else seems to fall apart, shows that he's still full of life. It doesn't matter that the days go by, and his tickets come up empty. Coimbra always reaches out his hand to pick the number that might bring him fortune tomorrow or the day after. One day, sooner or later, because in this world, everything can fail, except luck for the man who buys a ticket with faith. Faith was never Coimbra's problem. Hope wasn't either. You can't have one without the other. Don't confuse faith in lady luck with religious faith, though. He once had that too. When he was younger, he believed deeply. He even started a brotherhood, St. Bernard's Brotherhood, after the saint whose name he carried. But by the time he turned 50, after years of reading and thinking, he found himself without belief. He didn't leave the brotherhood right away. His wife managed to keep him as treasurer for a while, and she would bring him to the saints' festivals. But when she passed away, the widower broke completely from the saint and the rituals. He gave up his position at the brotherhood and became a redeemed brother, which meant he was free from all duties and would never return. He didn't try to pull others away from faith or stop anyone from praying. No. He just stopped praying himself, neither for himself nor for others. Around friends who shared his views, he would admit how much he disliked religion. With family, he enjoyed making jokes about pious women and priests. By the time he reached 60, he no longer believed in anything neither from heaven nor earth except for the lottery. Yes, the lottery still had all his faith and hope. At first he bought just a few tickets. But as he grew older, and especially after loneliness crept in, his habit became stronger. He couldn't imagine letting a lottery pass without buying at least one number. In the early years, when luck didn't come, he promised himself he wouldn't buy another ticket. And for a few lotteries, he kept that promise. But then someone would come along and offer him a nice number, and Coimbra would give in, buy the ticket, and wait again. Coimbra used to walk through life like this, going on and on through the years, until he reached the time when lottery tickets became part of his days. That was when he started buying 6 tickets every week, resting only on Sundays. The sworn clerk, a man named Amaro, who's still alive today, was the one who tempted him during his weak moments. As soon as Amaro noticed Coimbra's growing hope in the lottery, he began to encourage it, telling him stories of people who suddenly became rich. Fulano did this, Cicrano did that, Amaro would say, telling each story like a legend. Coimbra listened and believed every word. Soon, he gave in to every possible trick to chase luck, tricks that superstition could make feel certain. The number of a court document, the total of a fee, a random arrangement of digits, everything became a sign to choose a ticket, buy it, and wait. At the first lottery of each year, he always bought the number that matched the year. He used this method since 1884. By the last lottery of 1892, he tried something new. He flipped the digits around and bought number 2981. By then he never felt tired of doing this, and there were two main reasons and one smaller one. You already know the first two: necessity and habit. The third reason was that fortune seemed to flirt with him kindly. Not all his tickets were losers. Sometimes almost as if on purpose, Coimbra would say that a certain ticket would be his last, and he wouldn't buy another one if it didn't win. Then the draw came, and he won 50,000 rei, or 100, or 20, or even the exact amount he had spent. In other words, the prize paid for more tickets. Buying for free, that was how he described it. One time, the big prize went to number 7,377, 2 numbers ahead of his. His number was 7,375. That moment gave Coimbra new hope. He lived the last years of the empire and the first years of the republic like this, not really believing in either government. He didn't believe in anything anymore. The justice system, in which he worked as a clerk, held no faith of his. To him, it seemed like an institution designed not to serve justice, but to either settle or prolong human conflicts, be different and opposing paths, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the left. He didn't know the royal ordinations, except by name, nor the imperial and republican laws. Still, he truly believed that these laws were worth just as much in the mouths of authors as in those of defendants. In his view, they were simply a collection of rules that could be twisted to fit any situation or claim. Don't mistake him for a refined skeptic, one of those minds who soften disbelief with a gentle, friendly smile. No, his disbelief was like a worn-out cloak. He only ever left Rio de Janeiro once, and that was to go to Espírito Santo in search of diamonds he never found. Some said this failed adventure was what sparked his love for the lottery. Others claimed the opposite, that his belief in the lottery had given him a kind of early vision of those very diamonds. Either explanation was possible. A third, perhaps more common cause, might also explain both his belief in the lottery and his chase for diamonds. The human soul is so subtle and complex that it confuses the eye when it acts outwardly. Whatever the truth, that was the only time he ever left Rio. For the rest of his life, he stayed in the city, growing old and eventually dying there. The Brotherhood of Saint Bernardo took care of his burial, not because he couldn't afford it himself, as we shall see, but as a kind of moral duty to their founder. He died in the early days of President Campo's sales term, in late April of 1899. He had just attended the wedding of a clerk named Amaral as a witness when he suffered a sudden congestion. Before midnight, he was gone. The advice found in his will can all be summed up in one word: persist. Amaral requested a copy of the document to use as a guide for his 5-year-old son, who had just started school. He did it sincerely, and not without sadness, because Coimbra's death always seemed to him the result of his own recklessness. He hadn't had time for any affectionate memories of the old friend who had witnessed his wedding, and might have become his child's godfather. Before the stroke that took him, Coimbra had not been suffering from anything serious, not even a minor illness, just a bit tired perhaps. All his organs were working well, and his brain, while never particularly brilliant, was no worse than before. Maybe his memory showed some weakness, but he comforted himself by saying, "With my memory, many bad things have finally left my head." At the courthouse he was well liked, and at the office, respected. During São João festivities in 1897, the clerk Amaral suggested that Coimbra should rest, and offered to take over the office to follow the strengthening example of his friend. Coimbra refused, but with thanks. Still, he could not stop worrying that he might weaken and fall completely, with no strength left, neither body nor spirit, for his work. He no longer left the office in the evenings without a glance full of early sadness. Christmas of 1898 arrived. From the first week of December, tickets for the big lottery worth 500 contos were put up for sale. Some ticket sellers in their ads called it the monster lottery. Coimbra bought one. It seemed that this time he did not follow any special combination of numbers. He simply picked a ticket from those offered to him at the counter. At home, he kept it in the drawer of his desk and waited. This time, yes, he told Clerk Amaral the next day. This time he'll stop trying my luck. If I win nothing, he'll quit playing the lottery forever. Amaral was about to approve the decision, but a different thought stopped his words before they could leave his mouth. Instead of agreeing, he asked a question. "Why stop forever?" he said. "The lottery is like a woman, it might one day finally give in." "I'm no longer young enough to wait," replied the clerk. Amaral leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Hope doesn't have an age," he said slowly, as if tasting the words. "I once wrote a poem about that. And there's an old saying, those who wait will always get what they want." Coimbra shook his head. "Not me," he replied. "I won't wait, and I won't win. This ticket is the last one." He had said this many times before, and everyone knew he would break his word again. If he lost on Christmas, he would try again on the Feast of the Kings. Amaral knew this, so he didn't try to change his friend's mind. Some habits ran too deep for reason to fix. But this time, Coimbra really meant it. He told himself this was the final try. He wasn't dreaming of small wins, like the ones he used to get 50 or 100,000 reais, just enough to tempt him again. No, this time it was all or nothing. Either 500 contos, or nothing at all. If he lost, he would give up for good. He would leave behind his duties, like he had left his brotherhood and his faith. He would stop being a customer and start going to the devil's mass instead. The days passed, as they always do, 24 hours each, the same light and dark, work and rest. Coimbra waited for the 24th, the day the lottery wheel would turn. In the meantime, he kept doing his job. He copied papers, signed documents, and wrote reports. And even though he dreamed of riches, his work still gave him pleasure. That didn't change. But when the 20th came, everything shifted. The big day was close now, just 4 days away. That's when the image of 500 contos started to fill his mind, pushing aside the papers on his desk. It wasn't only the closeness of the date that did this. It was also the talk in the streets, and even in the office, people whispering about big wins, about fortunes made in a moment. And more than the talk, it was the sight of a man who had won of those prizes 5 years ago. Coimbra remembered the day that man came in Guimarães, the executor of a shoe importer's will. He had walked into the office, signed his name, and left. He didn't look different from anyone else. But he had won the lottery. And now, Coimbra could not stop thinking, why not me? While the document was being prepared, someone who was with him asked if he was holding a Christmas lottery ticket. No, Guimarães replied. Well, you can't always be lucky either, the man said. Coimbra didn't have time to ask anything else. The executor's friend told him that, back in 1893, the executor had won 200,000 Ray. Coimbra stared at the executor in disbelief. It was him. The very man. Someone who, for a small sum and a numbered ticket, had walked away with 200,000 Ray. Coimbra looked at him again, carefully. This man was rich. He was lucky. 200,000 Ray? Coimbra asked, just to hear it again from the man himself. 200,000 Rays, Guimarães repeated. It wasn't because I tried or wanted to, he explained. I never used to buy tickets. That time, I almost hit the kid who was trying to sell me one. He was Italian guardate, signore, he begged, shoving the ticket in my face. Tired of arguing, I went into a hallway and bought the ticket. 3 days later, I had the money in my hands. Coimbra didn't make a mistake while writing the document, even though his fingers were working on their own. In truth, he wasn't thinking about anything else but memorizing this man, replaying him in his mind, studying him, even shouting at him silently. You also have a ticket for the 500,000 Ray prize on the 24th, don't you? Tell me how you did it. Guimarães signed the document and left. Coimbra felt like running after him, touching him, checking if he was real, if he was made of flesh and blood. So it was true? There really were winners. People won big prizes like that. And the calm with which that man told the story of buying the ticket. Coimbra would be just like him if he won 200,000 Ray, show much more so, if he won 500,000. These broken sentences give only a vague idea of the confusion in the clerk's mind. Until now, he still had faith, but it had become just a habit, a long and strong one, without surprises or excitement. Now he had seen a man go from nothing to 200,000 Ray with a simple, annoyed gesture. Coimbra didn't even enjoy the thrill of buying lottery tickets. In fact, he once tried to smash Lady Luck's head. But she, looking at him like a lover, turned his impatience into kindness. He ended up giving her 5 or 10 mil Ray 3 days later. After that, Coimbra went through the rest of his workday like a machine. That afternoon, as he walked home, the idea of winning 500 contos slowly took over his mind. It was more than the 200 contos the other guy got. But Coimbra deserved more, didn't he? He had waited for years long, empty, lonely years barely touched by the rare 100 mil Ray here and there. He had more right to this prize than others, maybe more than anyone else. He ate dinner, then went to his neighbor's house. He didn't say a word about the lottery. He was afraid of saying anything out loud and losing his chance, or worse, being laughed at. That night, he dreamed of the ticket and the prize. The cambista himself brought him the good news in his sleep. When he woke up, he couldn't remember clearly whether he had gone to the cambista or if the cambista had come to him. But he clearly remembered the money green. Large, fresh notes. He even touched his hands when he woke up, hoping to feel the crisp bills. But it was just a dream. Still, the dream had left a soft, cool, green, and rich feeling in his palms. As he passed the Banco da Repubblica that morning, he thought he could deposit the money there before investing in property, bonds, or other assets. The 21st was even worse than the 20th, full of worry and waiting. Coimbra felt so nervous that he thought his job was unbearable. Normally he enjoyed the pile of paperwork, but not today. By the afternoon he felt a little better. But as he left the office, he heard boys shouting in the street, selling lottery tickets. Their cries from the big public stand stirred his heart all over again. As he passed the church where the image of Saint Bernardo was honored the brotherhood he had helped create, Coimbra looked back with longing. Those were the days when he still believed. Once he would have made a vow to the saint. But not now. Sadly, he could not, he whispered to himself. He shook his head and walked home. Coimbra didn't eat dinner without seeing the saint's image sneaking into his thoughts 2 or 3 times, with a peaceful look and a gesture of eternal happiness. To the poor clerk came another sadness now, another dry and even bigger emptiness. He didn't believe. What he lacked was that soft religious faith, he told himself. Later that night, he went out for a walk, and to shorten the way, he turned into a narrow alley. As he left the alley, he thought someone was calling him. He turned his head and saw the saint himself, now more heavenly than ever. It wasn't the wooden statue anymore, it was the real person, as Coimbra said to himself, the living presence of that great Christian doctor. The illusion was so strong that Coimbra imagined the saint reaching out his hands, holding the same crisp, wide banknotes from his dream. Imagine that night of the 21st and the morning of the 22nd. He couldn't go to his office without first walking into the Church of the Brotherhood and stepping inside again. The reason he gave himself was curiosity, just to check if the local people still cared about the place like they used to. Inside, he found the church warden, an old and devoted man who came toward him with joy in his eyes and said, "Your Honor, here today." "That's right. I'm here," Coimbra answered. "I was passing by and remembered I wanted to know how you're treating my guest." "Your guest?" the church warden asked, confused by the metaphor. "My old Saint Bernard," Coimbra explained. "Oh, Saint Bernard. How could anyone treat a miracle-working saint like him anything but with respect?" the man replied. "Did your honor come to this year's festival?" "I couldn't make it," Coimbra said. "Well, it was beautiful this year. Lots of donations and a big crowd. The committee was re-elected, did you know?" Coimbra hadn't known, but he nodded like he did. Honestly, he felt he should have known. He called himself careless and lazy, then turned to the statue with what he thought were humble eyes. Maybe they really were humble. The church warden saw them as faithful eyes. The man also looked up at the statue and made his usual sign of respect, bending his upper body and slightly kneeling with one leg. Coimbra didn't go that far, but he copied the gesture. "You know," the church warden added, "the school is doing well." "The school? Oh, right. Yes." Coimbra walked out of the church feeling strange, as if something old inside him had woken up. He had not thought about that school in years. His wife's time had long passed, and with it, he believed, had gone all things connected to it. But now someone told him the school still existed. "Still exists," he repeated, surprised. "It has 79 students," the person said. 79. The number hit him like a cold breeze. Back in his day, there had been no more than a dozen boys, all poor, all dressed in worn clothes, all speaking in quiet voices. Now, 79. That seemed impossible. He asked a few questions, careful not to show too much interest. The Brotherhood still ran the school, paying a director and 3 teachers. The year would end with a big ceremony. They even hoped to bring the Archbishop. He left the church with a strange feeling in his chest. Not joy, not sadness, but something in between. It was like a memory trying to come back, but not fully. He remembered how his heart used to beat fast when he heard the boys shout, when he saw them run through the streets. And now, as he walked home, those old voices seemed to follow him. "The last one, 500,000 rays," the boys cried as he passed through the square. 500,000 ray. The last one. He tried to ignore them, but their voices stuck to him like dust. They followed him all day, sometimes from other cellars, sometimes from his own mind. That night, he went home without returning to the church. He had almost stepped inside, but something stopped him. A sudden thought, or maybe a small fear. He could not explain it. The next day, the 23rd, he decided to see the school again. But it was no longer in the old building. It had moved. He found it in a better house, a 2-story house with 7 windows, a garden, and an iron gate. It looked solid, proud, alive. He stood outside for a moment watching. Then he walked away, without going in. Coimbra walked slowly, his thoughts tangled in the weight of the moment. How had he, of all people, ended up being one of the first to write such a remarkable book? He passed by the school twice, almost deciding to go inside. But what would he say to the principal? He feared the laughter of the children, the way they might point and whisper. So he turned away and headed back to the office, where he belonged. As he walked, memories rushed back to him, memories of when he was just a boy, learning how to read. Yes, he had been a student once too. And he had avoided many a slap on the hand by promising to say prayers to the saints. One time at home, he had taken a sweet from his father, though it turned out to be spoiled and feared punishment. In desperation, he promised to light a candle for the Virgin Mary. His mother, moved by his fear, begged for mercy on his behalf. She won his forgiveness, and then Coimbra asked her for the money to buy the candle. He lit it, keeping his word. These old gentle memories softened the dry routine of his paperwork. He remembered how, as a devoted brother and treasurer of the church brotherhood, he had made many promises to Saint Bernard and kept every one. Where had those days gone? Finally, the morning of December 24th arrived. The lottery wheel would spin at noon. But Coimbra woke before the sun had even begun to rise. Though he knew his ticket number by heart, he wrote it down on a piece of paper from his notebook to fix it in his mind, and in case he won the grand prize. That thought sent a shiver through him. A final hope stirred inside him, the kind that faithful men never fully let go. It whispered, without words, what was stopping him from winning 500,000 ray. 500,000 ray. The number itself overwhelmed him. He closed his eyes, stunned by the image it created in his mind. The air around him seemed to echo, 500,000 ray. His hands moved as if already holding the money. On his way, he stopped at the church. To his surprise, it was open and empty. Or so he thought. There, kneeling before the altar of Saint Bernard, was an old black woman. Her rosary in hand, she seemed either to beg for a favor or to give thanks for one already received. Coimbra watched her posture, her devotion. He realized suddenly that he was part of the reason for her peace. He looked at the statue too. It was the same one from his youth. The woman finished her prayers. She kissed the cross of her rosary, made the sign of the cross on herself, stood up, and left. Coimbra was about to leave too when two thoughts crossed his mind. The lottery prize, of course, and the school. Behind them came a sudden idea, then a calculation. And although many said, and rightly so, that the clerk loved money, he truly did, this particular calculation was selfless. He wanted to give something back, to contribute to the growth of the school, a place that had also been his creation. He promised himself he would donate 100,000 reis to the school, to São Bernardo School, if he won the big prize. He didn't make the promise formally, but in these simple, sincere words, I promise to give 100,000 reis to São Bernardo School if I win the big lottery prize. Once outside, he thought again. If he didn't win, he wouldn't lose anything. And if he did win, he would gain 400,000 reis. He quickened his pace and went back into the office, burying himself in work. No one can count the hours of agony he lived through that December 24th, 1898. Only someone who has waited for 500,000 reis can truly imagine it. Still, he kept doing his job. He received and counted the money owed to him for legal documents. Around 11:30, between one document and another, he repeated the promise he had made to the school. I promise to give, etc. Noon struck. Coimbra's heart beat wildly, not gently like the clock at San Francisco de Paula. The clock's 12 chimes were steady, predictable, and final. But his heart, fast, unsteady, full of fear and hope. It wouldn't calm down. When he heard the final chime, he couldn't stop thinking about the spinning wheel, the moment when the numbers and prizes would finally be revealed. It was happening now. He thought of going out to find the news, but held back. It's hard to believe a man so used to waiting could feel such impatience. Maybe, deep down, he already knew what was coming. He walked out the door the moment the clock struck 4:30. The day's work was done, and he couldn't wait another second. His heart pounded like a drum as he hurried to the nearest lottery office. There, written in chalk on a blackboard for all the world to see, were the winning numbers. And there, staring him in the face, was his number. 500,000 reis. He had won. If his soul had been in his legs before, now it weighed like lead. His feet refused to move. The world went dark for a moment, and it took him several long seconds to catch his breath and see clearly again. When he finally came to, he pulled his lottery ticket from his wallet with trembling hands. It matched. The number was correct. But doubt crept in. Could he have copied the number wrong? Maybe he had made a mistake when he wrote it down. There was only one way to know for sure. He jumped into a horse-drawn cab and raced home. Once there, he checked again. No mistake. It was his number. He had won. And everything happened just as it should have. 5 days later, the Brotherhood's table received 100,000 reis from him, which went straight to St. Bernardo School. In return, they sent a formal letter of thanks to the man who had started both institutions. A group of members delivered it in person, as a sign of deep respect. By the end of April, Amaral, the clerk, got married. Coimbra stood beside him as a witness. But on the way back home, Coimbra died suddenly, just as we've already said. The Brotherhood gave him a funeral worthy of a man who gave so much. They even built him a tomb in the San Francisco Xavier Cemetery, a lasting tribute to the good he had done. Today, the school teaches more than 100 students, and the 100,000 rays that started it all are now known as the Coimbra legacy.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.